How does the loss of Steele Venters impact Gonzaga's projected lineup, rotation, and minutes distribution? We're going to break it all down on today's Locked On Zags podcast.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, happy Labor Day, happy September, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Folks, 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it is the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com, use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Folks, again, happy to be here in the month of September. September means we're closer to October, which is when we get craziness in the kennel, and October means we're closer to November and the start of the college basketball season. 9 weeks from today, as you are listening to this on September 2nd. Very, very excited to be getting closer and closer to college hoops. Today is also Mailbag Monday here on Locked On Zags. If you want to get involved in Mailbag Monday, join our Discord channel. It's free to join. There's a link in the show notes on audio and video platforms. You can ask questions there. There's a whole section for them. I'll get them sorted, get them into the notes, get them ready to answer for you all on here. You can also email me if you don't want to join Discord, andypatton013@gmail.com. I'll get your mailbag questions answered there as well. First question comes from BK on Instagram, who says, what is your projected lineup and breakdown with Venters now out for the year? Yeah, I talked about this a little bit last week, just in terms of what the Steele Venters injury means for Gonzaga. Of course, it is a devastating story for Venters himself. He's spent all this last calendar year rehabbing from that torn ACL that he suffered 2 days before the start of the last season after transferring to Gonzaga from Eastern Washington. He spends, again, 9-10 months rehabbing. By all accounts, is going to be good to go for the start of this upcoming season. Instead, he suffers a torn Achilles. He is now out for the upcoming season as well. Will miss 2 full seasons of college basketball. Really devastating stuff for Steele. And it is a unique situation for Gonzaga because last year when he got hurt, he was projected to start. He was going to be the starting 3. We know that at that point, Dusty Stromer was kind of suddenly elevated to a starting role. He did a lot of good things in the first half of last year, but also kind of struggled to find his place. Gonzaga ended up kind of really riding the ship when they made a change to add Ben Gregg to the starting lineup and have have Dusty Stromer coming off the bench. This year, however, Venters was not going to be expected to play a similar role. Maybe I'm wrong, but generally the expectation around the program was that Steele Venters was going to be coming off the bench this upcoming season. I have done these full minutes projections in the past. I'm going to do another one here. All of these minutes adds up to 200 minutes divided by 5, 40 minutes per position per game. So that is how we got these numbers here. And it's a kind of a good way to get a sense of people who have maybe higher expectations for how much certain bench players might end up playing. Like we're not going to see a lot of reduction in the minutes for some of the starters. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. So this is an update, just minutes per game for every scholarship player on Gonzaga's roster. There's 11 scholarship players who are going to play next year. Braden Smith is, of course, planning to redshirt, and then Steele Venters will be out for the year. So here are minute per game projections for the 11 scholarship players for Gonzaga. Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman, I have them both at 33 minutes per game. That is a slight drop for both of them. Last year, they were both around 35 minutes per game. I'd be surprised if their playing time dropped any more than that for a overall season average. So I expect them to be around 33. I then have Michael Ajayi next at 29 minutes per game for him. That's a drop from where he was at Pepperdine, but I think we're expecting him to take a drop. But I still think he's going to be somebody who's on the floor more often than not for Gonzaga. The two bigs, Ben Gregg and Graham Ike. I got Ike at 25. That's a little more than where he was last year. Last year he was about 24, in part because of foul issues that frequently took him out for large chunks of games. Ben Gregg comes in at 24 minutes per game. So that's your projected starting five: 25 for Ike, 24 for Greg, 29 for Ajayi, 33 for the two guards, Hickman and Nembhard. Coming off the bench, the leader in minutes per game, Caliph Battle, brought into this program, in my opinion, to be the team's sixth man to fill that valuable microwave scorer off the bench role. Got him at 22 minutes per game. The two sophomores, redshirt sophomore Braden Huff and true sophomore Dusty Stromer, come in next at 7 and 8 at 15 minutes per game each. Huff 15 minutes, Ek 25. That's basically all your minutes at the 5 position there. Stromer at 15 minutes per game. I think you'll see him fill a lot of those minutes at the 3, some of those minutes at the 2 as well. And then there's 4 minutes remaining, so I split them up among the 3 other scholarship players. Emmanuel Inocente getting 2 of those minutes. I think he'll play slightly more, although obviously still not projecting him to be a regular part of Gonzaga's rotation. And then Jun Suk-Yo and Ismaila Diana each at a minute apiece. Next question, similar topic here, talking about Steele Venters. This one comes from Jeff via Gmail, who says, both Steele Venters and Caden Perry are really good players and both really, really wanted to play at Gonzaga more than anywhere else. Tragically, injuries have complicated both of their careers at Gonzaga. Is there any chance Steele Venters' experience at Gonzaga ends differently than what Perry went through? Yeah, I don't know. I said this on the show already. I'm not a medical professional, nor have I seen indicate anything about Steele Venters' injury other than what has been reported nationally, which is that he suffered an Achilles injury and he's going to miss the upcoming season. Typically, you miss an entire year with a leg injury and you miss the entire following season with a separate injury on your other leg. That is probably not a good sign. And yes, Caden Perry dealt with multiple injuries. His were to his back. I know he had some ankle stuff as well, but the back was really what was kind of debilitating for Perry and ultimately led to him making the decision to medically retire and end his basketball playing career before he really got a lot of opportunities at Gonzaga. The stories are already different. Steele has proven himself at the Division I college basketball level in a way that Caden Perry never got the opportunity to. Steele, though, of course, never actually got to play for Gonzaga, whereas at least Caden Perry did get the opportunity to do that. They're both uniquely tragic in their own way. Perry, we never got to see really just any of him at all outside of some garbage time. He just didn't get the chance to actually show what he's capable of doing. For Venters, we saw what he's capable of. We just never saw it in a Gonzaga uniform. I have no idea if Steele intends to return to Gonzaga for what would be his 7th year of college, but would be his redshirt junior season next year. My expectation at this point is that he will try to return. There's not been any indication otherwise. I assume he is probably having a lot of decision making right now of how do I want to proceed here? Do I want to go through this lengthy rehabilitation process? Doing it now when you're insured and have all those opportunities versus doing it in a different, there's a lot of factors that go into this. I suspect that for right now, systems are go for Steele to prepare to be a part of Gonzaga's rotation for the following college basketball season. And until we hear otherwise, that is the assumption I'm going to continue to operate under. Well, Gonzaga Baylor are rumored to play in Mexico City. We talked about that last week. Coupling that with the UConn and Big 12 conversations, we're going to be talking some conference realignment yet again. We got more coming up on that topic in just a second. Right after I tell you about 5-Hour Energy, folks, just about every single day right after lunch, I feel tired. And it's that afternoon lull. If you're like me, you're like most people. You are not alone. In fact, research shows us that more than 70% of people hit a wall after lunch. So let a 5-Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. If you're like me and have been working on cutting your sugar, one of the great things is that 5-Hour Energy has 0 sugar, plus it has a convenient portable size, and it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore: watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. You can try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavors and it is delivered right to your door. So folks, just go to 5hourenergy.com and get some 5-Hour Energy products today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your first order. The offer is only valid through September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is no good on subscription orders. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, folks, segment 2, still any patents, still Locked On Zags podcast. Still powering through Mailbag Monday here. Got a couple of questions from Jeff via Gmail regarding conference realignment and the UConn and Big 12 rumors currently going on. This first question here, Jeff says, would it be fair to say, assuming the ratings are good, that the game in Mexico will go a long way towards making your Mark's case that adding Gonzaga and Connecticut brings great value to the Big 12? If so, then all of us Zag fans that want Gonzaga to succeed need to make the case for Gonzaga by buying the pay-per-view Gonzaga Baylor game when it comes time for the game in November. Okay, a couple of things here. Yes, the rumor right now, Gonzaga and Baylor will play on November 6th, the first Wednesday of the college basketball season. It will almost certainly be Gonzaga's first game of the season. The rumor is that that game could happen in Mexico City. This was reported by Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org. It was reported on Locked On Zags last Wednesday, for those of you who missed it. It was also reported that if that happens, Flow Sports is likely the media partner that would broadcast the game, and they are a pay-per-view subscription service, meaning that you would have to pay individually to be able to watch said game. Now, that is not confirmed. In fact, none of this at this point is confirmed. Gonzaga Baylor in Mexico City, not confirmed yet. Flow Sports being the media partner and then thus the game being a pay-per-view game, not confirmed. I want to make that exceptionally crystal clear at this point. Maybe by the time you're listening, it has been confirmed, but as of right now, it has not. However, if that is the reality, if it is a situation where they are playing that game and the only way to watch it is to use the pay-per-view service, yes, I do think that it is a way to potentially increase Gonzaga's interest from the Big 12. Here's the deal, though. I don't think this is a dramatic needle mover for a pretty simple reason. The reason that the Big 12 has been hesitant on Gonzaga is not motivated by their TV power. Put another way, the Big 12 presidents and athletic directors know that Gonzaga is a very watched product. They know that Gonzaga playing Arizona and Baylor and Houston and Iowa State and Kansas and BYU and Texas Tech and Kansas State and et cetera, is going to draw numbers. They know that people are going to watch the games. They know that Gonzaga brings a prestigious brand and a large set of eyeballs for a basketball perspective. None of that is things that they need to be convinced on. Yormark himself is sold. He is in love with Gonzaga and UConn. He wants them in the conference. Gonzaga does not need to sell him on it. He has done his part to sell the presidents and athletic directors on Gonzaga and UConn as significant potential additions to the conference because of the amount of people who watch them on TV. So Gonzaga Baylor drawing huge pay-per-view numbers is going to be another argument in favor of that, but it's not the problem, if that makes sense. I don't know exactly what the problem is. Some of the stuff we've heard out loud is that the presidents and ADs are not wanting to continue to add to the Big 12 right now. They don't feel like it is necessary. They just added 8 teams in the last 2 years. They'd rather kind of let the dust settle and see how things go with this new expanded conference. They're continuing to add just to add when these programs are not in necessarily being aggressively pursued by other partners. They're not feeling like now is the time that they need to strike. And that argument hasn't changed. It was the argument that we saw used against Gonzaga last year. Gonzaga is still not in a situation where things are about to change. In fact, the only next domino that feels like it's about to change is the ACC. And that fact seems like a stronger argument for Big 12 presidents and ADs to say, hey, Brett, let's just wait. Let's see what happens with the ACC. If it completely falls apart and all those teams become available, we want to prioritize that because they have football brands. If it doesn't fall apart, then let's maybe take a look at some other options. And so I think Gonzaga's how the pay-per-view event goes isn't going to be it has more of a likelihood of having a negative impact, frankly, than a positive impact. If it doesn't do very well, that gives the Big 12 presidents and ADs a little bit more ammunition to use against Gonzaga. Whereas if it does go well, we're just still back at the point that we are now. Next question, another one from Jeff via Gmail. He says, if reports are correct, it appears UConn only has about 8 or 9 yes votes for being accepted into the Big 12, which seems similar to where Gonzaga was about 10 months ago. Is it possible or even likely that in order for Connecticut and Gonzaga to get into the Big 12, they will be as a package deal? Also, which one do you think is more likely in the next 7 years? Gonzaga and UConn are in the Big 12 together, or neither are in the Big 12 and Gonzaga is somewhere other than the WCC. Okay, so I kind of answered some of the stuff a little bit in that last question here, but I'll reiterate. No, I don't think that the specific people who are voting against UConn or who are not yes votes for UConn right now and are probably a lot of the same teams that were not yes votes for Gonzaga 9 to 10 months ago. And it's probably for the same reasons. Not wanting to make big moves right now, not feeling like there's a necessity to rush these programs in when they're not necessarily being pursued by other options and it's going to cost these schools money. And yes, they're working on ways to not add UConn's football till 2031, and Gonzaga obviously does not have football, and so the cost to the universities is very small right now. But I don't see a reality where the teams that are anti-Gonzaga or anti-UConn would be in favor if it was both rather than just one or the other. Like I don't think that is the hang up. So I don't think that in fact, I think your mark saying, let's add both of them right now is actually going to be more harmful than good. Yes, it gives them an even number. There's reasons that it's beneficial. I think it might make some sense. And I think there's a lot of teams in the Big 12, presidents and ADs, who are absolutely on board. Yes, I'll vote yes right now to add both UConn and Gonzaga. But the ones who are not, I don't think are going to be swung in the direction of saying yes if it's both as opposed to one. And I think that's the big kind of hang up right now is how do we get enough of those teams to swing over to saying yes in order to make this actually happen. To answer the second question, I think it's more likely that neither are in the Big 12 than both. I guess that's the kind of the question here. So if it's whether Gonzaga and UConn are both in the Big 12 or neither are in the Big 12 and Gonzaga is somewhere other than the WCC, I would probably lean with it being that second one as being more likely. I think it's also fairly possible that neither are in the Big 12 and Gonzaga is still in the WCC. Although if we're talking 6 or 7 years from now, hopefully Gonzaga will have found a way out by that point, whether it's joining the Big East, whether it is joining the Big 12, whether it's joining whatever happens with the Mountain West Pac-2 kind of potential merger or reverse merger that could happen there. But right now, I think that is probably a little bit more likely just because I don't see those teams that are saying no right now dramatically changing their mind. I do think the biggest hinge here is the ACC. All of this depends on what happens to the ACC. If Florida State and Clemson get out, find a way out legally and join the Big 10 or SEC or Big 12 or whatever, which right now there's not a lot of clarity on which of those conferences desperately wants Florida State the way that Florida State desperately wants out. So that could create some kind of unique wrinkles. If the ACC is able to quickly rebuild while losing Florida State and Clemson by potentially adding UConn, for example, from the Big East, that could create some interesting wrinkles. If UConn goes to the ACC, does the Big East then pick up Gonzaga? Like, what could happen out of that? Whereas the other reality of the ACC just fully imploding, just straight up done. At that point, then you have a free-for-all. Florida State and Clemson are going to be the most appealing options. People are going to go hard after Miami. You're going to see aggressive pursuits of Duke and North Carolina as well. Does the Big 10 scoop most of them up? Does the Big 12 get the rest? Does the Big East try to go after Syracuse and Louisville and Boston College and some of their old Big East members? Like, at that point, it becomes complete chaos. Anybody telling you they know what's going to happen at that point is lying to you because it is going to be very chaotic. So that, to me, is the biggest hinge. And I think the people in the Big 12 who are like, let's wait and see what's going on with the ACC. Again, any other argument, whether it's pay-per-view, whether it's combining UConn and Gonzaga, all of those arguments fall flat if there's people in the Big 12 who are saying, I just want to wait and figure out what the heck's happening with the ACC, because if we have a chance to land Miami or Clemson, we would much rather do that. And that's it's never fun to hear that if you're Gonzaga or even UConn, but it makes sense why those conference commissioners those presidents and ADs would be like, let's wait and see if we can make some bigger splashes out of that ACC. Well, we're going to move on here. Third, final segment. What has been Gonzaga's most successful form of roster construction under Coach Mark Few? We're going to talk about that and a few other things, all coming up in just a second. Hey, Locked On fans, I want to take a moment here to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you are going to love, Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. From recruiting players and hiring a coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. Will you be able to handle the pressure? Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go whenever you want. And of course, we have a special offer for our Locked On Zags fans. Using promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store, you can receive a free boost to your program. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the Google or Apple App Store. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, folks, closing out the show today with 3 more mailbag questions here to kick off the month of September. These next 2 come from Austin via Discord. Austin says, with all the ups and downs with recruiting via the transfer portal and freshmen out of high school, where do you think Gonzaga has had the most success? That is an incredibly relative term. They've obviously had way more players come through the program out of the high school ranks than they have out of the transfer portal. Even if we're just doing transfers in general, not just portal transfers, still obviously more players coming out of high school in that case. I think Gonzaga's hit rate on transfers is higher than their hit rate on high school recruiting. Granted, part of that is just, again, Gonzaga's success early on was in part doing more with less, and they haven't really been a high player in the high school recruiting since the majority of Mark Few's tenure. They haven't really been big time high school recruiting magnets. That's just not been part of who they are. They've recruited transfers and of course international market really heavily, whereas the high profile high school recruiting just wasn't really a thing. So to me, I think it's transfers. I think that their success navigating the transfer portal and landing high profile transfers is more notable than their success with high school recruiting, in the sense of even early on, Dan Dickow was a huge transfer portal success. JP Bautista was a junior college transfer who had a ton of success. Those are early examples. And then you get into your non-transfer portal additions like Nigel Williams-Goss or Brandon Clark or Kyle Wiltshire. And then, of course, you get the Nemhards, Andrew and Ryan Nemhard coming in more recently. They've supplemented the roster with transfers to an incredibly high successful degree with guys like Gino Crandall and Jordan Matthews and Byron Wesley. They just feel like they've really used the transfer portal as well as almost any team in college basketball. Whereas when you compare Gonzaga's success, high school recruiting, sure, they have some huge wins. Corey Kispert was a non-top 100 prospect who became a superstar. Adam Morrison is one of the most, insane high school success stories for Gonzaga, or really for anybody. Just tremendous success there. Of course, you have Drew Timme, and then you have the 5-star guys, the Jalen Suggs, the Chet Holmgrens of the world. They've had a ton of success in that regard. They've also had a ton of international success. We talk about that all the time, but DeMontis Sabonis, Rony Churioff, Killian Tilly, Shemek Karnowski, et cetera, in that regard. I think what makes Mark Few and Gonzaga so great is that they have had success in all 3 of these areas, and it is not an easy answer to pick which one, but I think relative to their peers, the most impressive one would be the transfers over the freshmen. Austin has a follow-up question to that where he says, speaking of transfers, which Gonzaga player, excluding Ryan Woolridge, has been the most successful in regards to the Ryan Woolridge effect? Yes, Ryan Woolridge effect is a term coined by yours truly probably a year or 2 ago when talking about transfers who come to Gonzaga. Effectively, if you are a small major or low major transfer who comes to Gonzaga from a role where you were a primary ball handler or the team's lead guard, you had the opposing team's defensive focus on you, and you come to Gonzaga where you become the 3rd, 4th, 5th option offensively, we tend to see those players increase their 3-point shooting efficiency. I don't think this is very exclusive to Gonzaga, other than Gonzaga prioritizing these types of additions. I think if a player were to transfer from a small school to a Kansas or a Kentucky or a Louisville or whomever and have a different role where they're not asked to be shoot at as high of a volume, they're probably also going to see an efficiency growth. So I'm coining it for Gonzaga, but it is likely something that happens at other places as well. Looking at some of Gonzaga's transfers in the recent and even some guys from a little bit farther back, just to look, all I did for this was simple 3-point percentage prior to Gonzaga, 3-point percentage at Gonzaga. That is not anywhere close to enough research to fully look into this. Attempts matters, various other things as well. But here are the ones that stood out to me. Rasir Bolton, who obviously did not come from a low major, but he came from a different role at both Penn State and Iowa State to the role he filled at Gonzaga. In 83 career games, Bolden shot 34.2%. Prior to his time at Gonzaga, in 69 games at Gonzaga, he shot 42.5%. So that's about an 8% increase there. Malachi Smith, another great one here. He was a 38% three-point shooter in 95 career games prior to coming to Gonzaga. 38% is great, but at Gonzaga in 37 games, he shot an even 50%. That is a 12% increase from his time at Wright State in Chattanooga till his time at Gonzaga. Andrew Nembhard, much smaller growth, but he was 32.7% in 67 games at Florida. He was 35.8% in 64 games at Gonzaga, so about a 3% increase for Nembhard there. A lot of other guys did not live up to it as much as we like to project that transfers are going to do so when they come to Gonzaga. Aaron Cook's three-point percentage didn't increase. Gino Crandall's didn't. Admon Gilder's did not. Like it, a lot of guys don't end up doing kind of following the Ryan Woolridge effect the way that Ryan Woolridge so effectively did in his 1 year at Gonzaga. A couple older examples that I think qualify here. Eric McClellan shot 30% from three in 42 games prior to coming to Gonzaga. In his 54 games at Gonzaga, he shot 34.2%. So that's a 4.2% increase. And then the biggest one that I could find, and I think this is just a simple example of Gonzaga utilizing Drew Barham far differently than the way the Memphis Tigers used him. But in 49 games at Memphis, Drew Barham shot 27.6% from three. And in 64 games at Gonzaga, Barham shot 47%. That is a 19.4% increase in his three-point efficiency from Memphis to Gonzaga. That is your winner right there in terms of the Ryan Woolridge effect. Although, again, as a stretch four in an era where they didn't use him very often, I think Barham just kind of found himself in a much better situation to suit his skill set at Gonzaga than he was in with the Tigers. Final question of the show comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, what are your thoughts now that Gonzaga's women's basketball has released their full schedule? Other than at Stanford and a neutral against Florida State, it seems like they could or should be favored in every single game. How many games do you think they need to win to get another top four seed in March? Could 27-4 be enough? Yeah, for Gonzaga at Stanford, definitely the tough game on the schedule. The neutral for Florida State is in the Paradise Jam, which is in the Virgin Islands. They'll also play Texas Tech while they're down there. Decent Big 12 program there. Gonzaga also hosts Cal in the Kennel. They host Wyoming, Rice, Montana, and Eastern Washington. Decent programs there at the mid-major level. All teams Gonzaga has a lot of comfort and familiarity, having played them all in recent years. They also have true road games at New Mexico and at Colorado State. Two Mountain West teams that are better basketball teams on the men's side than they are on the women's side. I think that's fair to say, but there's still road games against decent opponents there. Also keep in mind that Gonzaga adds Oregon State and Washington State to their conference schedule. That moves the needle very little on the men's side. It does move the needle much more on the women's side. Oregon State was an Elite Eight team last year. Washington State was a tournament team last year. Both of them got gutted in the transfer portal. Oregon State quite notoriously lost basically everybody from a team that went to the Elite Eight last year. It was very depressing to see that happen to the Beavers, but they're still going to be good. They still have a very good coach. I think Washington State's still going to be good. And more importantly, these two teams are still going to help Gonzaga's strength of schedule in conference play, which was abysmal the last couple of years. The WCC has not been good on women's basketball. Still, with Wazoo and Oregon State down a little bit, 27-4 feels tough. If they go 27-4 and their four losses are all close losses, they're all good losses, as good a losses as Gonzaga can take. If they lose at lose at Stanford, lose to Florida State, lose to the second best team in the WCC on the road, and then lose one other game, maybe there's still a top four seed. But honestly, I think for a four-loss Gonzaga team is probably a 5 or 6 seed. I think they need to go 28-3. I think 29-2 is the best spot for them to be if they can get up to that spot. Can they do it in a year where they lost so much of their backcourt from last year when the Trunk twins are gone, when Brenna Maxwell's gone? We'll see. Yvonne Ejim's going to be counted on in a major way. They got a lot of new talent in that backcourt as well. Taylor Dalton comes in from St. Mary's. She's going to be a huge addition. Lauren Whitaker is an addition in the front court for this team as well. Like, they're going to be good. And I think they're going to have a real opportunity to win 26, 27, 28 games this upcoming season. And I think they have to be in that conversation if they want to get a single-digit seed or at least a top 5 seed in the 2025 NCAA tournament. Going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much To those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day, I'll be back later this week, continuing to keep you up to date on all things recruiting, all things getting ready for the season here for Gonzaga basketball, all that coming up and more. Thanks again for listening, folks. And until next time, as always, go Zags.